Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's event. Today, our speaker is Platt Thompson from Coding Dojo. Platt is an education professional who loves exploring technology and computer programming topics with his students. He has held various roles throughout the years, including as an engineer for an event company, assistant instructor at UCLA, a mentor at Hacktoberfest, and now works as an instructor with the national technology education company, Coding Dojo. When he's not working, you can find Platt exploring blockchain and quantum computing technology. Platt, I'll hand this over to you now.
Okay, great. Hey everyone, so I'm going to be talking today a little bit about CSS and HTML and talking about how those impact the modern web and how you can build different apps using those. The good news is that HTML is fairly simple and has just some basics you need to learn about it to get started. Really, the front end of the internet, what you see on the browser, is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I'm going to go ahead and pause here one moment. Seems like I have a bit of an echo going on over on my end. Firas, I don't know if you could help me with that momentarily.
Sure, Platt. Is there anything we can? I'm already muted, so maybe it's the earplugs or.
Sure. Let me go ahead and try that again. 1 second. On my end. Firas, I don't know if you can help me with that momentarily. Okay, it looks like it might. Okay. Sorry, just having a bit of echo over on my end, playing back and forth on the delay there.
I no longer hear any echo.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to mute my audio over here, and I'm just going to plow forward if that's all right over the next 50 minutes or so. I'll monitor the chat if there are any questions or anything like that. I'm just going to go ahead and shut that off now. Hopefully that works for everyone. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can still hear me. Cool. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript form the foundation of the internet. And HTML and CSS are really what we're looking at today. When you go to a web page, you're actually requesting documents from a server somewhere. So you can see in the diagram right here, hopefully we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript. We're actually just requesting information from a computer. So when you're typing something into your URL bar up here, then you're making a request for documents. Today, looking at HTML and CSS, we're going to be looking at the content part of things, which is HTML, and the CSS part of things, which is the styling. You don't need CSS, but it is a nice thing to have. To start out with, I'm going to show you actually the first website that was ever created. It was created by Tim Berners-Lee back in the early 90s, and this is it right here. This is just pure HTML on this end, and no CSS, no styling, so it still works. I could still click around, click on these different links, but it won't maybe do, it won't be as presentable as it could be. And a good way to think about this kind of thing when you're thinking about HTML and you're thinking about content on a site is something like this. If you think of a newspaper, so this is a famous newspaper image back from, I think, the 40s. And if you look on here, you can see you have this title up there at the top. You have the headline, just like on a newspaper. And you have sort of these subheaders underneath. It says GOP, sweep, indicate. I can't read the rest of it, but it has that little sort of subtitle. And you have the Chicago Daily Tribune up here and all these things. So that's the way to think about HTML. It's a web page like a page on a newspaper. The thing that was really innovative about HTML is that you have these links that can actually take you to different pages. So looking at these columns on here, if you'll see at some part of a newspaper, it'll say jump to page 17 to read the rest of the story. What we can do on the internet is click on the link that'll actually take us directly to that page. So that's the great thing about HTML. And Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the internet, is actually he actually came up with a very elegant solution to doing this, and it's, like I said before, it's fairly simple when you get to writing it. To give another example of how HTML is, so I'm going to take this Wikipedia page here. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And you can see I'm just saving the HTML. I'm not saving the CSS. Go ahead, do that. I'm going to take this, drag it up here. Now you can see this has the same content. If I wanted to read this HTML page, I could still do this. I could still use the links on the page and do this. I've heard this before. I think it's still true, where you can actually get a USB stick and you can store the entirety of the internet on a USB stick, because it's just, if you just get the letters and you don't worry about all the other stuff, all the images and all the CSS and things like that, then it's a massive amount of information that you can have in a very small size. So going down here, this is kind of what Wikipedia looks like if we don't have any of the styling part of it. So speaking of styling, going back to this, over on this page, we have, we have this kind of styling over here. They chose a different font for it. Just something that makes it more presentable and more readable in a site that you'd really want to go to. And using just HTML and CSS, you can actually do pretty remarkable things with it. On this page, for example, just jumping over to Spotify, all of this, you can just do this with HTML and CSS and get a really great presentable app up and going. If you had to go into, the actual streaming portion of it, that kind of functionality, then you would need some kind of programming language like JavaScript or something else, Python maybe. But that's really what you're looking at when you're looking at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You're sending these requests. They might have to grab some data from a database over there, and they're sending you something back. And this is what the difference between the front end and the back end is on the internet. The front end is what you see and what you interact with. It's everything on your browser. Your browser is this application that's making these requests for you. And when you're viewing and interacting with something on the browser, that's the front end. People who build servers, they work on the back end. And people who work servers, databases, that's all on the back end. That's kind of hidden from us, actually. And a good way to think about this is actually kind of like as far as the sort of request cycle, a good way to think about it is like you're sending a letter. Let's say I want to get baseball statistics from the 20s about the Yankees or something. I can write a letter and I can say what information I want and maybe include some payment in it, and I can write an address and I can send it to, say, Donnie in Boston or something. He works at Baseball Corporation. So I can write this letter, I can send it through the postal service, get to him, he looks at it, make sure it's all okay, and he sends me back the information that I want. The important things about this, it's important to note that a lot of this I don't have to worry about. A lot of this I can just request from the server and trust that it works. I can trust that the postal service will work, and I don't care if it routes me, from where I am, I'm in Idaho right now, down to Topeka, and then over to Chicago, and then finally to Boston. I don't have to worry about that as much. I can just make a request and know I'm going to get documents back. So for today, we're going to be talking about HTML and CSS mostly, not worrying about how to interact with those web servers quite as much. And I'm going to talk about CSS a little bit more. So CSS is a language that's still evolving and still growing, and it still has some road bumps along the way. Thankfully, in the past 5 or 6 years, it's gotten a lot better, and it's had a lot of major improvements. So now we're able to do things a lot more intuitively and a lot more powerfully with CSS. To give you an example, here's this I think is 96 when they made this movie. It's Space Jam. And they actually still have the site up, the site from 1996. It was like a promotional site back in the 90s. And the way they did this, to get all this kind of stuff working, is they did use CSS on this, but it was very, very different from how we have it now. They use tables to align the site. So instead of using like tables like in an Excel document, they'd have to do all these little hacks with them to get things to work and to get these to go around the Space Jam logo. And so thankfully with CSS, a lot of those problems are solved. There's still some left, but I'm hoping today to talk about CSS a bit more and just give you an idea of how to use it within a web application. Finally, briefly, JavaScript is about interactivity. So I click on this. If I was to click on this logo and I want it to be able to jump somewhere else on the page, or I want to make requests for data or something, that's on the JavaScript end, which we won't be talking about quite as much. For now, let me go ahead and I'm actually going to open up VS Code, which is made by Microsoft. It's one of the most popular code editors in the world. And once I'm in there, then I'm going to start writing some HTML code. So one of the things on here, I'm going to open up my terminal, which is kind of lets me speak directly to the computer and do whatever commands I want. Here, I'm just going to go ahead, create a file name called index.html. And that's kind of the standard to do for like your home page or your first page is index.html. I can call it whatever I want, but I need to make sure that has that extension on the end. Just like you might see for an image, you know, .jpeg or .png or something like that. So now that I have that open, I'm going to go ahead and open it up in VS Code, which I'm using as my editor here. And I just have a blank slate to start out with. So let's go ahead and write our first HTML element on here. If I was to do that, I could go on here and let's start out with thinking back to that newspaper headline. Let's create that headline now. And we're going to do that using something called an H1, which is like a header one, the most important header on the page, like your headline. So on here, I'm going to say my first web page on here. And now I'm going to go ahead, go over here and just say open in default browser and open this up. And there we go. As simple as that. I could go in VS Code, write the code that I wanted to have appear on the page, and then now I'm getting that on the page. The thing is, when you're doing web development, you're going to be bouncing back a lot, back and forth between your browser and your text editor. With some other things, like let's say you're doing mobile development, you might have another app that you use to find out how things are actually looking on the user's device. But in this case, we can kind of just bounce back and forth between our editor, whether it's Chrome or Edge or Firefox or anything like that, and see what's going on over there. So I created this web page right here, or excuse me, this what we call a tag right here, an HTML tag. And one of the really clever things about HTML is you will wrap the text that you want to have in these tags right here. One of them right here for saying what you want the beginning of the tag to be, and it's going to have this slash to say the ending of the tag. Cool. And then jumping down to the next line on here. So we have one element right here. Let's go ahead and write another. So I'm going to do the similar sort of thing. I'm going to say now I want an H2. You actually have 6 of these. It goes H1 all the way to H6. I have a nice autocomplete thing that just jumped up too. I'm going to call this is my subheading. I can go ahead and save that, jump back to the web page, and I'm going to refresh it. And I get this is my subheading coming up. So this is showing me, this is showing you how you can actually add semantic detail to your elements, because that's really what HTML is all about. It's having these tags describing what this text inside actually is. So if I have a P tag right here, that's saying it's a paragraph. This is my paragraph text, and I'm actually going to use something. It's like a programmer thing. It's called lorem ipsum. It's just a bunch of placeholder text. So I'm going to do that, do a bunch of placeholder text, all this stuff. Wrap around. There we go. And I'm saying how I want the content inside this to be and how I want it to be interpreted. So that's a very important thing about HTML, and it's always a thing to remember whenever like even there are senior developers who can forget this sometimes, that it's all about having the most semantic descriptive tags that you can have when you're actually wrapping the content. So jumping over to here, let me go ahead and refresh. I have the header, my subheading, and my text appearing right here. So the thing about these HTML tags is you're going to have to memorize, I think probably 90% of what you do involves memorizing maybe a dozen or maybe up to 24 tags. Like there are, I don't know how many hundreds there are. I believe there are over 100 at this point, but most of them you don't really ever have to mess with much. So far we have this going on. We have these tags here, this tag here. I'm going to jump over here. One of the great things about having a browser as sort of our demoing tool is you can inspect what's going on inside of it. And I can inspect what my code is actually doing. So one way you could do that is right click, click inspect, and it'll open up this kind of tool over here on the right or on the bottom. So when you have this tool open, a lot of times it'll show you a ton of information. A ton of that information you can actually just kind of ignore. And right now I'm going to actually ignore it. All I'm looking at right here is it's actually showing me some more HTML tags over here. I'm seeing HTML, I'm seeing head, and I'm seeing body right here. I'm going to actually kind of inspect in here, see what's going on. Okay, we have my H1 right there. It's telling me I have an H2. It's telling me I have this paragraph tag. Now, getting really comfortable with these developer tools takes a while, and it's kind of outside of the scope of this today specifically. But now that I can see that I can actually inspect what's going on in my browser and see how my code is translating from my text editor to my page, let's go ahead and look at the first website, for example. Or how about, yeah, let's go back to that first website. So you can see no matter what the site is on here, you know, the first one ever made, or if I went to Spotify or something like that, they all share these common sort of characteristics. I have an H1 tag there. See if this is going to show me what's inside here. H1, an A tag, which we'll talk about in a minute. We have a paragraph tag that we've already looked at. And so these things adding semantic detail on here. So let's go ahead and start adding a link then. That's the thing that we're missing right now is a link. And how we're going to do that is using an A, actually. Some of these might not seem that intuitive at first, the naming conventions. But I go ahead and do A on there, and it auto completes this thing here. For now, this is my opening tag. This is my closing tag. It's just like these ones up above. I can say, click me to go to Microsoft, for example. We have one new thing in here, and this is how we actually add more functionality to our HTML elements. So over here on this A tag, A actually stands for anchor. It anchors different sites together. If you want to know like the actual, you know, sort of, yeah, a hypertext anchor, I think is what it's saying there. Yeah, hypertext anchor. That's what it's doing, is it's connecting these different sites together. So you're able to bounce from one to the next. The other thing that it populated here, which you're always going to have on these A tags, are this hyperlink reference, or href on here. A lot of times those call them hrefs. And this is saying what we want to have this A tag do. So in this case, I can jump over to the href and I can say the name of the site that I want to go to. So for example, let me go over to Microsoft site. And let's go ahead and take this URL, paste it in. I'm going to save this, and then let's see what happens on our web page now. Cool. Now we have click me to go to Microsoft. It's done all this like kind of sort of styling for us. It already looks like a link. And so if I click on this, it'll jump me over to Microsoft, which is very nice. I don't have to do any kind of crazy coding and send these requests and stuff and change the location of my page and all that. All I have to do is click on this and it'll take me there. So let's go ahead and run through a few more HTML elements that you'll need to know. This one I did right here is kind of a not quite unique. There are, I believe, 4 or 5 of these ones, where you see I don't have a closing tag here. What I did is I just shoved it in the middle of the text. I could also do something like this. I could just put it like right here. Let's see what that does to the page. Created a break in the page, a line break in there, which you know, BR for break. That's what it does here. Another one like that is HR for horizontal rule. Just create a horizontal line across the page. And this is probably, if you've been on the internet for a long time, some of this is starting to look probably a little familiar, you know, from how websites used to be before they had all this crazy styling and stuff. A lot of times you'd see these horizontal rules on here. And so let me go ahead and jump back. I'm going to leave that in there for now. It's getting a little bit more crowded. One more thing I want to add on here. That's its own sort of self-closing tag. These are all tags again. H2 is a tag, H1 is a tag. These ones are just self-closing because I'm not putting anything inside them, right? I'm not putting I don't need anything in there. I'll just say put it on my page. So so the closing one is now going to be if we want to add images to our page. Again, it's like it's everything a newspaper can do. So newspapers can have pictures. I'm going to have image on here, and I'm going to let it autocomplete for me. There we go. So a couple things on here. We have a source. This is just asking for the source of the image. Let me go ahead and do this. And let's see if I can find a kind of a small one. Oh, that was huge. It's telling me down here. Some of these are massive. Oh, it's okay. I'll grab this one. I'm going to open it up. And here's my link to this image. So let me go ahead and copy this. And where was I? Right there. Okay. I have the link, and I want to use this source on here. And we'll get to the alt in just a second. But just as easy as this, I can go back, refresh my page. Now I have this huge image on here. Finally, the alt tag is overlooked a lot, but it's very important. What it helps for is actually accessibility. So this is for people who have screen readers or who are they can't see, then they still need to be able to use the internet. So you have some sort of description on here. This is sort of the alternate for this image, describing what's in the image. So I'm going to say a bear in the forest. I can just say whatever I want. It's also very useful too if you run, let's say you run the New York Times and you have an article from 1998 that, since everything's on the internet now, you have someone looking for this article in 1998. And they go to that article and they're supposed to have all this information, supposed to have graphs and figures, and it says if you look at graph B, it tells you everything you need to know. Problem is graph B might not be there anymore. This image URL right here might no longer exist. So what you want is something descriptive in case just something breaks. You want to have some kind of fallback for users so they can still know what's actually going on your web page. Cool. So we've started to cover this a little bit right here. I'm going to do one other thing. We have all our different tags on here. VS Code is great because it has this kind of shortcut, which I'm going to do now. So when we're doing HTML, it isn't actually just a bunch of tags in there. Well, it is, but it has sort of a format that we have to follow that was put out by Tim Berners-Lee in the early days of the web. and I have a quick autocomplete, and it's going to do all this for me. So it might look like a lot at first, but it's really just HTML again. I have this up here. I have an HTML tag wrapping everything. And below that, I have, or I'm sorry, right here and right here wrapping everything. And I have two things sort of below that. I have these two right here wrapping all this middle content. Here's the ending tag, here's the beginning tag. And inside here, we have a similar thing. We have a head tag and a closing head tag. Opening body tag, closing body tag. The head is going to be information about your site. This isn't going to appear on the page. And this is going to be sort of almost metadata about your site. I mean, we have a meta tag there even. It's going to be giving information about your page, but it's not actually going to be what's going to appear on your page up here in the head. That's going to be for the body. The body is where we would put, let's go ahead and recreate it right now. I'm going to do H1 and I'm going to say my first heading. Here at the end, I'm going to say my first subheading. And let me do a paragraph tag again. Again, I can't live without these sort of autofill things. They're really nice to have. Do some of this, some let's do a bit less. Do something like that. And let's go ahead, throw a link in again. Cool, I still have the URL here. Oh no, I have the bear down below. And then finally my image, or let's say, I'm just gonna make this Microsoft.com. It might not work, but that's fine. Bear in the woods. Okay, so I have the information about my page up here, and I have the body down here. Inside this body, I'm going to go in and add one more thing that's very useful as a developer. Actually, two more small things. One is below this image, or perhaps above it, since it's so big. I'm going to say I want to have an unordered list. Well, how am I going to do like bullet points, right? How do I do an unordered list? Well, I just do UL for unordered list. So this is the list itself. Inside the list, I want to have my actual bullet points with things in them, my actual list items. So what do I do for list items? Just LI. Some of these are very intuitive, which is great about HTML. They're very good general names for what things are. So in LI, I'm going to say my first item. Then I'm going to say, create another one. It's going to be called my second item. And then another one called third. And let's go ahead, go back to the page and see what's going on here now. So this one was working before, even though we weren't strictly following HTML format. The browser was still going, okay, well, fine, I'll make it work. I'll make it render correctly on the page. But now we're doing it properly. If I go ahead and refresh here, there I have my list items on here. Just a bunch of list items, a bunch of bullet points. If I want to have an unordered list on here, or excuse me, an ordered list on here, I can just do OL for ordered list. And now I'm going to get a numbered list like that. So that's the basics of HTML so far and how it works. You'll get more familiar with these tags as you go along. You'll start to memorize them, see what you can do with the head up here. Real quick, this title where it's saying document, I can say my first document. If you look up here, that'll update. That's the title up there. It's one of the cool things about the web is as you learn this stuff, you start noticing these patterns everywhere as you're using the internet. So let me go ahead and take just a moment. I'm going to see if I can get this chat pulled up on here. Okay, cool. I'll go ahead, jump back over here. Great. So now we've looked at some basics on HTML. If I actually go to the GitHub over here, you could follow along with all this and see some of the exercises they have in here. So for example, if I want to jump over to, let's jump over to HTML. We have common body tags that we talked about. Headings, paragraphs of text, images, links, that A tag that we talked about, lists, tables, which we'll talk about a little bit. It's kind of a complicated syntax. Forms are the way, it's just like if you're going to fill out a form for the DMV or something and send it out. You could have those on web pages, and that's how I send information to the backend, to the server. Cool, covered all this. Anchor tags, lists. Lists you use all the time. Like I said, even HTML is still evolving a little bit. And even for things like navigation bars, like up here at the top, they'll still use unordered lists and lists for that. So that's something that's really ubiquitous that you'll see everywhere. Tables here, since we only have an hour here, and I'm going to still get to CSS. So I'm going to take a quick look at tables. You wrap everything in a table head. Wrap everything in a table tag. Then we have the head of the table. These are just be like if you have a table. Let me actually take it over here. I can copy and paste it into my code, and we can see how it looks. Yeah, so we have the headers. This is what our column is going to be: email, phone number, and we can add in different things on there. So tables can be useful. Like I was saying with the Space Jam example, those sites are actually very. There's an old way where they had to kind of do hacks with tables, but these days you should only use tables for tabular data, for table data. Cool. Copy and paste it in. Sweet. Cool. So talking about forms in a similar way to how we have images before and how we were saying where we want our images to go. And I'm going to take out this table for now. Let's go. Let's leave it blank for now. I just created this form tag here. Have action, which I'll get to in a minute. And I can go inside here. I'm going to write this out and then go back and show you how it looks on the page. Cool, let me jump over here. Okay, so this is my form. This is what I have. You've used these thousands of times. You see on see them on all kinds of sites where I have some kind of username I can type in, some kind of password that I can type in. I can click to actually submit that and send out this form. So just like I was saying before, where you can like send a form to the DMV or something. You can do the same thing and send information, send these forms to specific servers. So jumping on here, let's say Alice Smith, and let's say I want to type in my password, just 123, not a very good password. I could click submit right here and submit the form. Over here, I'm going to jump into HTML and show you what's actually happening on here. So I'm wrapping all this in a form. I'm saying all this data, this is what I want to get submitted. And here's another new thing that we're doing. We have input on here. And just like we have the href up here, we're saying what we want. We're giving it some, that's actually called an attribute. It's giving an extra attribute to what I want on this input. So I'm saying the type of this, I want it to be text. The type of this input, I want it to be password, which is why you can see over here, it's actually showing those little dots instead of my password, because it's going, okay, well, this is a type, this is a password input. I don't want to show this to everyone. So let me block that out. I can even do something, show one more example, like a date input. There we go, as easy as that. It used to be, you might have to, before HTML5, which came out 6 or 7 years ago, I think, you used to have to actually do all this complicated stuff to get this to work. But now that's out of your hands, and I have this whole date display that can come up. Jumping back to here, so we have input type password. I have a placeholder here. You want to tell the user what they're supposed to type into the actual field. So I have username and password in this kind of grayed out thing, just like you've seen on a ton of forums. And the way I get those to appear, just use placeholder. There are a bunch of different attributes to learn about. There are all sorts of things. For now, we're just kind of sticking with the basics and seeing how those affect the actual HTML elements. By the way, this is the last one. The last self-closing tag is an input here, because we're not putting content in the input. That's for the user to do. So we can just have it as its own self-closing tag like this. Button, we want some text inside, so we're going to have click to submit inside. Cool, so that's our form on there. And the final thing is you want to say where you're sending the form to. So here I could say I want to send it to, I don't know, Microsoft.com. And that's actually going to be that's the action that the form is going to take. That's where it's going to send all this data to. And then back there, they can process it. So going back to sort of the baseball statistics example, this is like sort of me entering in this input information. It's like me writing my letter to send it to Donnie in Boston, and writing all that stuff out. And then finally, when I click submit on here and send off the form, that's the same thing as like me dropping it in the mailbox. And it has the address on here where I want it to actually go. Cool, so that's what we're looking at for this part so far. Let me just check, make sure to miss out anything. Looks good, because I'm about to be jumping into CSS. I'm going to increase the size on this just a bit so it can be, you can actually see what's going on. Should be nice to have. Cool. All right, so we're all set to move forward. I have an HTML file like this. Now I'm going to create another file. Go back to this. And kind of the convention, just like we have index.html, I'm going to do style.css. And I'm going to do it a little bit different now. I'm not going to do it in the terminal. I'll just do it using VS Code's the VS Code text editor here. I have this new file button. Let's create one, call it style.css. And now we have a blank CSS file. Remember, CSS is going to be for styling our page. Okay, so over here, this is how we're actually going to be starting to using the head portion, because so far we've only been using the body, putting content on the page, but this is the stuff behind the scenes up here in the head. So inside the head on here, I actually want to be able to link to my CSS and say, hey, these two documents are connected. This HTML, it wants to have all these styles on this stuff, and the CSS has the instructions for it. So I want this HTML to call out to that CSS and say, let me bring in the styles from CSS, and so I can use them over here. The way to do that, I'm going to just do link. It'll tell me some stuff. It's a style sheet. That's what CSS stands for, is cascading style sheets. It's just giving you styles. HTML stands for hypertext markup language, because it's just content on the page, whereas CSS is styling. And here I'm just going to say I have an href, just like I had down here. And I'm going to say I want to link to my style.css. Go ahead, do that. Jump over, refresh. Nothing's going to happen yet because I haven't changed any styles yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say I want to make my header right here. I want it to be red. Do something simple like that. Over to style.css. Oops, sorry. I always do that automatically because when I'm setting up things. Over here, it's pretty simple actually. I can say what element I want to style, and I can use that as sort of I can sort of select it. So I want to make my H1 red. So I just type H1. And I want to say what styles I want to have applied to it. So I'm going to create curly braces, hit enter, go inside there. So this is saying for my H1 element, this is what I want to do to it inside here. And some of these CSS properties, there are a ton of them. You probably have to memorize a couple dozen of them. But really, the thing about web development isn't about, or any kind of app development, any kind of programming really, it isn't about memorizing things necessarily. There's some things you should have memorized. But you can always Google something to find out the information. So it's more important to understand the concepts and know how to apply them. For example, I mean, just here, for example, I have one CSS property. If I want to make it red, I can bring up color like this, and that'll just make the text whatever color I want. Let's try red. VS Code is also nice because it gives us an example of what it looks like. If I type in an R, it gives me these other options. I'm going to do red for now. So I'm saying what I want to change on it with color, and I'm saying what I want the value to be there. I want it to be red. Go ahead, jump over, and I save this. Oh, forgot to save it. So this still thinks it's a blank document right now. See, it's actually giving me an indicator with that thing. It's telling me it's not saved. Let me go ahead and save it, jump over. By the way, that's the cause of like a lot of frustration early on, is just forgetting to save things. So that's always a good thing to do, is to save like that. And there we go. We got it turned red. So let me show you a few other things that you can do. Show you how kind of simple it can be actually. I'm going to say font size, I want it to be 50 pixels. And I have that little punctuation mark, that semicolon, which you see in a lot of programming. There we go, made it a bit bigger. Let's say I want to get rid of these little, they call them serifs, those little things sticking out from the ends of the letters right there. You can say font family sans serif on it. That just means without any of those little serifs on here. I do that. There we go. It's just normal block letters now. So there's a ton of stuff that you can do with CSS, and this is just kind of, you know, dipping our toes into the ability of what you can do as a developer to manipulate your pages and get them looking really good. So on here, let's go ahead and let's say I don't like the underline on this A tag. Let's try this on another element. For my A tag, let's say I want to do is it text decoration? You can always just, it's so easy to just go how to remove underline from link, CSS. And I mean, there are tons of jokes about, you know, using Stack Overflow for things, because it's like Yahoo Answers, but for programmers. And there are all these kind of resources you can look at, and a lot of resources on here too, if you're looking at this, to find out how to do things that you want to do. In this case, I want to go in and I want to, let's clear this up just a little bit. First website, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead, go back, save this, refresh. There we go. We got rid of the underline on it. This bare image, I might want to make it a little bit smaller, so let me change the size of it. Let me go ahead and do width. I'm going to make it, let me do this. I'm going to do 400 pixels and then height 200 pixels. And let's see what happens to the image. Okay, made the image smaller. Let me make this a bit more extreme. So this is a common sort of thing that happens where you're actually stretching or squeezing the image unintentionally. I don't really want it to be distorted. I just want it to be smaller. So one trick with CSS that you can do actually is if I want it to scale down properly and I don't want it to get sort of stretched or squeezed, I can either set the height or the width on it. So in this case, just going to do that, just set the width and everything will scale down proportionally. One nice programmer sort of thing to have here is commenting out code. And a lot of text editors, how you do that is you click on whatever it is or you highlight it. You hold down Control or hold down Command on a Mac and you hit slash. So I'm going to do that here. And this means that this text will be sort of invisible to my site, essentially. So when I'm loading up this site, it's going, okay, H1, we want that to be red, we want that to be 50 pixels, okay. And it'll see this and it'll actually just ignore it and keep going. It's like it's not even part of the code. And this is very useful if you want to maybe come back to something later and I just want to comment it out for now. And it's also useful, as the name would imply, for comments. If I say, for other developers, if they're working on this code, I can say sets dimensions of image. I can just leave a comment to myself. And as your code gets longer, and this could be hundreds of lines, and often your whole code base will be, thousands and thousands of lines. It's good to have these comments in case some other developer wants to work on it, or even just further down the line. If I haven't come back to a project in a long time, a lot of times I'll forget how it worked in the first place, and I'll have to go back. So it's good to have that sort of information set up and to know how that's working when you're doing this kind of thing. And that's the basics of CSS right here. Let me go ahead and jump over to the platform a bit, over to the GitHub page, and touch on this a little bit. So first of all, a good thing to remember with CSS is that everything is a box. This image is a box. It looks like a box, and it is. But actually, everything else is a box too, and they call it the box model. So I'm going to use these developer tools again. That's really that blue box right there showing me what the element is. That's also a box. Even a circle is a box, actually, in development. You'll just kind of round the borders off a little bit to make it look like a circle, but everything's a box. In fact, let me turn this image into a circle real quick. Let me go really extreme with it. Like really extreme. Oh, that's as far as it'll go. But I'm able to round off the corners like this and make it look different. But it's actually still a box, no matter what. I'm going to take one moment here. I might have see the problem now with this. Hopefully I'm able to stick around here a few more minutes. Let's see what this does. There we go. Okay. Let me go ahead, open up the chat real quick. All right, cool. Feel free to ask anything if you want to check out anything on what we've covered so far. That's the basics of HTML and CSS. And now I'm just going to make sure I wrapped up everything on sort of this GitHub page, make sure that we've talked about everything we need to. So request response cycle, I'm requesting information from somewhere. Full stack, that's like the front end that we talked about. If you work on the front end, like the browser side of it, and you work on the server side of it, together they would call that, instead of front end and back end, if you work on both of them, that you would be called full stack. tools of a web developer. VS Code is one. My terminal is one. Using the developer tools that I was just talking about. Those are some tools that you have. HTML, we talked about some common tags on here, how to use those. Having good document structure. And every time I'm building an HTML page, I'm starting with a template. I'm starting with using these kind of shortcuts that autofill everything for me. If I had to write it all by hand every time, that'd get pretty frustrating to do. So fortunately, you have these sort of shortcuts. In VS Code, which you hopefully downloaded, what I can do is I can just do an X. It's not going to let me do it now, but I do an exclamation mark and hit tab, and that'll autofill all this stuff for me. Always check your code and make sure that there aren't any, make sure you have any spelling errors or anything. That's a pretty common thing, is if you spell it instead of href, like you spell it HERF or something, then that won't work out. And finally, have elements that are describing what's inside of them, tags that are describing what's inside of them. So like H1 elements that we talked about, paragraph elements, things like that. Well, I talked about the inspect tool a little bit, sort of your developer tools that you have. I was showing how you could find HTML in there. I can select HTML elements, but what's cool about it is also if I go ahead and click on it, I see all my HTML there. And actually down here, whoops, no. Move this over. There we go. It'll actually show me the styles that are being applied. So on this H1, I have a color, font size, font family, that kind of stuff. This stuff down here are styles that are applied by your browser. They call it the user agent style sheet. User agent's your browser. But I have the ones that I added over here. So let me add a bit more to this. Let's say maybe that right now you have a couple different things with CSS, and it gets a bit. This is one of the harder parts of CSS, is alignment. If I actually want to align this somehow on the page and align these ones down here, there are different ways to do that. Actually, a lot of different ways to do it, and that's when it starts to get more difficult. But for now, we can take just sort of a basic example of how that works. So this element right here is block by default. So that means it's going to take up this entire block, across the page. If I highlight it left to right, that whole blue area, even if the text is taking up this left area, it's very selfish with space, and it'll stretch up all over. Same with this paragraph right here. So let's say we want to get both of these side by side. We were saying we don't want these to be sitting, above and below each other and doing that kind of behavior. Let's say I want to get them side by side. Well, I can do that too with CSS. I can jump in here and I could say, let's say on my H1, we already did these things to it. Let's say I want to change the display of it. And right now it's a block. It's taking up that entire block of space, but I can change it to something like inline. I want it to be inline with other elements. And then let's say, actually, let's just try that for now. And then you'll see it didn't really actually change the alignment. And the reason for that is because this one below it is still blocked. So we actually have to do it to both. Let me go over here, do H2 again, and I'm going to say display inline. Cool, and now we have them side by side. The thing about CSS is, since it is still evolving and a lot of the headaches have gone away, there are a lot of, you can go to 100 different websites and you can see 100 different ways of aligning things. So there still isn't a really unified consensus on the proper way of doing things, but there is with HTML. With HTML and with JavaScript as well, and in a lot of ways, there are sort of there's a consensus on the proper way to do things, but CSS is still a little bit the Wild West. But that's also what makes development exciting, is they still have these developments in development. They still have people who are coming up with projects and coming up with new ways of doing things. And there's a really exciting front-end framework right now called Svelt, which I really like and which is useful for creating front end and doing stuff like that. And that was just made by some programmer. He works for the New York Times, and he just, with his free time, he wanted to create Svelt, so he ended up doing that. And yeah, it's one of the fastest changing fields. You have to learn the fundamentals of the internet, and you have to learn how to use HTML. That's going to be around forever. But things just get better and better, and you're able to continually learn new technologies and just get an idea of the concepts behind things. So over here we have our CSS. Let's see if we can add a couple more things. We have those side by side. Let's see, what do we want to do here? How about this? With a form, it's nice a lot to not have, you don't want to have it in a line like this. So let me get these side by side. So I'm going to do the opposite of what I did up here. Up here they were block before, and I changed them to inline, so they were in line with each other. Over here I'm going to do the opposite. They're in line right now. I'm going to change them to block. So I'm going to say all my inputs down here, I want them to, the display on them, instead of inline, which they are naturally, I want to change, some elements are inline naturally, some are block. You're probably going to modify them. Almost certainly you're going to modify them as you're writing your code. This one, I'm going to say I want it to be block. And there we go. It's that easy. Over here, what this actually does with this selector is I'm saying all the inputs on my page, I want them to have this behavior. And that's one of the great things about CSS is these are, I only have one H1, so this is only affecting one H1. But for other things, let's say every paragraph tag on your page, and you're probably going to have a lot of them, I want every paragraph on my page to have some sort of property. So here's a paragraph tag. Go ahead and move it down below. Here's another one. I have all these different ones on the page, but let's say I want them to be purple or something. I only have to write that once. And this goes back to a really fundamental rule of programming that I think is good to learn very early on, which is dry. It's DRY, don't repeat yourself. And if you can avoid repeating yourself as much as possible, then that will make for really good code. I'm going to make this purple. And there we go. I was able to change everything on my page. And so if I wanted to, let's say I'm happy with the site and I want to publish it. If I'm coming back later and I want to change some kind of style to all my paragraph elements, I don't have to go inside each one and change something. I have this one rule, this CSS rule for all my paragraph elements, and I can apply this to all of them. And then we have that block going on with the inputs, making them take up their own separate lines on here. Cool, so that's HTML, CSS, and CSS so far. When you visit a website, let's say you visit Microsoft or something, you visit the site, it's going to make a request to one of Microsoft's servers. It's going to send back the HTML and CSS, and your browser is going to load them. And it literally looks just like this. Now you understand how web pages are actually making that stuff appear. They have HTML for the content and CSS for the styling on the page. Once you get that back, then your browser will interpret all that, render it on the page, and hopefully learn something about how these two things work and you want to explore it further. Web applications have a bunch of new innovations that they're coming out with all the time, like I mentioned, and it's an exciting time to be a part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Firas for just a moment.
Thanks, Platt. Well, I just want to say thank you all for joining us. And again, thank you, Platt, for putting together such a great workshop. If you are not part of the Reactor community already, please do consider joining us on Meetup or directly through our Microsoft page. And you can also follow us on Twitter or even check our previously recorded workshop on YouTube. Finally, I just want to say I sent a link to the chat or the question part. If you have any feedback at all about how the event went, we would love to hear what you have to say through the link that I just posted. But please use the code of the event, which is 12488. And again, thanks all for joining, and thank you, Platt.
Thank you.